Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, can we have roll call, please? Amanda, where's it? She was just here.
She just went.
And now Knudsen's gone.
Okay, Trustee Knudsen? Okay. Is that right? Trustee Smith? Here. Trustee Valentine?
Here.
Trustee Stetler?
Here.
Trustee Kenneth?
Here.
Trustee Markle?
Present.
Mayor Bachman?
Present. So we have a quorum and we can continue. Next on the agenda is correspondence received. We do have some paper stuff that was given to us, and there is stuff embedded in the packet. Would anyone like to do anything about the correspondence received?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question about the Stewart ditch being in the storm drain.
Yes.
So I have no idea what that means, but is it,
In the process of replacing the sewer line that we had to replace over here, we found out there is a private irrigation line inside of our storm drain. And we notified them that they're gonna have to move it, and they disagree. It's a legal dispute. They have told me that they're hiring an attorney, so Nick has actually been involved in that, and it's an administrative matter because yeah, so, and if it comes to the point where you'll be involved, I'm sure Nick will have an executive session with you to talk about it.
Okay. All right, so nothing, let's move on to the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
So move the agenda.
All right.
Second page motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor?
I,
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. Next, we have announcements. Does anyone have an announcement? Yes, Mr. Merkel?
Yeah, so I'd like to continue what I was saying at our session that just finished. The mayor interrupted me while I was speaking. I hadn't finished. And I'd like to make a motion after, if it's appropriate, according to our attorney. But what I said was that I would like to apologize to the citizens for beginning that discussion in the first place. And the reason that Mary interrupted me was because I said
Excuse
that.
me, Madam Mayor.
Okay, but the reason that Madam Mayor interrupted me was because I said that I likened tap fees to a pyramid scheme. But what I wanted to finish with was that it is this snowballing effect and increasing of expenses and increasing of rules and limitations that make it more desirable to live out of town than in town, in my opinion. So thank you for letting me finish. And I would also like to propose that, I don't know, Nick, is it appropriate for me to make a motion during announcements?
So I think when there's an announcement that, I think if it's, okay, let me backtrack. I think it depends on the content of the motion, trustee, and if it's been properly agendized, if the public could reasonably anticipate that it was something that would be acted on tonight. If it has to do with agenda setting, that's sort of fair game because you're talking about setting something for the future. So unless you have something more specific for me, that's my general advice.
Thank you for the clarification. Yeah, then I would like to make a motion that we direct the mayor to produce a letter that demonstrates her understanding of the rights of citizens and trustees to speak without being censored. That's a motion.
Would that be a legal motion, Mr.? Is that an allowable motion?
I think it comes down to, we're talking about the board's procedures really. And, I think it is a proper motion to make, given that it is about the board's procedures within a meeting. I would offer that I could provide a legal opinion on that and share it with the entire board. But I do believe it's a motion that could stand if it got a second.
Okay, do I have a second?
I will give it a second.
All right, discussion.
May I? My reason to second this is that I think this is more appropriate for the attorney to do based on federal and state law in terms of First Amendment. I don't believe it's something the mayor should have to put together.
Further discussion? Trustee Martin?
Okay, so, yeah, that's kind of my expectation would be that she would confer with Nick or take a course or read a book, whatever. But just some sort of demonstration that not just that it's something that's said, but something that's understood. And I think that really this presents significant liability. I've seen a lot of spurious motions and was it I forget the procedure. Points of order raised while someone's speaking that are really attempts to censor, where my understanding, which if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be corrected, is that we can say pretty much anything we want. If there are ramifications from it or results of it, then so be it. But we're not to be interrupted or censored. So if if it's happening to you, hopefully you would be as understanding as you'd have the same understanding that I do. But I don't expect you to.
Further discussion?
Sure.
Yes. Mr. Valentine, or Trustee Valentine?
Well, here we go, I guess. You brought it up. Ever since I've joined this board and in our private discussions, principal discussions about, what all kinds of things, outside the meetings, you sort of expressed a free speech absolutist point of view. Okay. And that's a perfectly acceptable and stamped position. But it's not the law of the land. You keep referring to it as if it's the law of the land, and it's not. At one point, I carried around with me, intending to rebut this, some printouts of a whole bunch of websites that say councils, courts, all kinds of municipal entities may regulate what is said in the name of decorum, in the name of lots of things. I think there are something like 7 or 13 actual court cases, Supreme Court cases, that limit free speech. It's not absolute. None of those have to do with us, our situation here. However, I think it's fairly safe to say thousands of court cases exist attempting to get absolute free speech into places like courts and council meetings and all that. They fail. So it's not the law of the land. And what I fear here is that we want Madam Mayor to adhere to your particular, I'm not trying to single that out, but any particular person's definition of free speech, or to get us all to adhere to an absolutist point of view, which I happen to not at all, adhere to. So just from a legalistic point of view, yes, from a legalistic point of view, I lost my train of thought on that exactly, but from an abstract technical point of view, the problem is that, I think we're trying to bend this resolution, this proposal is trying to bend how we run our meetings to one particular view, the absolutist free speech view, which isn't the law of law. Certainly as I understand it.
Trustee McGinnis?
So I think in this discussion, we have to be very careful about conflating the ideas of censorship of ideas and following the rules of decorum that we have around how these meetings are conducted. And in my experience sitting on this board, the instances that are being referred to are not an attempt to censor somebody's ideas, but they're an attempt to bring the way that idea is expressed back into the frame of how we conduct these meetings. So, and if you want to look at rules and procedures, section 6, conduct of board members, town board members shall treat other board members and the public in a civil and polite manner and shall comply with the standards of conduct for elected officials of the town. And so I think really what we're talking about is not necessarily the expression of idea, but how that idea is expressed. And I think if we refer back to some of the language earlier in our work session, like the use of a pyramid scheme to in regards to some of our fee structures, that's simply not so, and the insinuation kind of brings us down what I would call a red herring. And so what I think in our discussion we really need to be mindful of are the instances that we're talking about actual attempts to censor our ideas, or are they attempts to bring those ideas back within the confines of the rules of conduct that we have already agreed upon.
Anyone else? You've already spoken this morning. All right, yeah. Trustee Peter.
What we're talking about here is actions. In my experience with both of you, you push each other's buttons. You do. And there's a reaction that Mary as to Thomas, or our mayor as to Trustee Margot, and Trustee Margot as to our mayor, primarily focused around how each of them perceive the meeting should be run. So I would suggest that we change our seating arrangement.
Thank you. All right, anything else? All right, we have a motion on the table for the,
I'm sorry, point of order, I'm not advice to any motion
where is that written?
in Robert's Rules of Order.
Oh, so we are now adjourned to our.
Of course.
Okay, then, Ms. Trustee Moore?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to respond to some of the statements. So my request was not to allow anybody to say anything. It was to have the mayor demonstrate an understanding of the law. So however that shakes out, if it's, we get to interrupt someone if we disagree with their viewpoint, if that's the law, then that's fine. I understand it to be different than that. When a person in the public is speaking and they say something that we may disagree with, I believe it is a liability for the town and for our insurer when we interrupt them unduly. If we give them 3 minutes to speak and we interrupt them, we're infringing upon their rights. Now, there are limits, of course, to what can be said. Obscenity, of course, not vulgarity. I think there's a distinction. But no threats. There are always things that aren't to be said. But simply saying, I think that making new people who get into a system pay the debts of the people who are already there is like a pyramid scheme, doesn't qualify as indecorous or obscene or even out of line. And if you agree, the purpose of this structure is so that you have the opportunity to say so. We don't shout each other down, we don't interrupt each other, we allow each other to speak for the time allotted, and then the other people speak. That's civilized society. That's what I'm asking to show, our mayor to show that she understands. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second on the table for, can you read the motion back, Amanda, please?
Yeah. To direct the mayor to produce a letter demonstrating, I wasn't sure of this part, an understanding of the law.
Yeah, the law regarding censoring or First Amendment speech. Yeah, I forget what I said.
More or less, for the mayor to produce a document understanding the First Amendment speech and the rights of people. She will get the word correctly and she listens to the tape. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, that motion fails. Now, I'm going to continue on with public announcements. I would like to announce that the town did receive our second installment of our Revitalizing Main Streets grant. So our project at Fifth and Grand now has reached a sum total of $1,010,592. So, yay, I think that project is very well funded at this point in time. We will continue on. All right. The next up is public comment. So this is for any topic not included on the agenda with a 3-minute time limit. Where'd I put it? Oh, it's back. Thank you. Would anyone like to address the board on a subject that is not on the agenda? Yes, Ms. Watson.
Suzanne Watson. First of all, I want to know to Nick that you've got a hook in your eye. It looks like it's kind of disturbing. I look at you on the wall there.
Oh, yes.
Bruce. So I'm a little confused by the screen, and I was confused by it last meeting. If Samira Vedder's name is on there, does that mean she's attending the meeting, or is someone attending in her name?
Neither.
Okay, so why is that name on there?
Because it has to be there because the screen that runs the meeting
Okay,
is there.
so could we just say clerk's office? Because it was really misleading to me at the last meeting. I thought Samira Vedder was commenting, even though everybody was saying she's not here, she's not
It's the
here.
name of the computer.
Okay, so what I'm saying is we might think about that in our remote meeting policy. I want to say, as far as the building inspector is concerned, when I look at Cedar Edge's budget, I'm always amazed at how much less the cost of their building inspector is. We really have caviar here. It's a California corporation. Sure, Dan knows what he's doing, but I think, and in the interest of affordability, our costs are really, really high. And the community came together 2 years ago. There were contractors, there were homeowners here. They were trying to get some movement on this because Colorado Code was initially a temporary setup that we had. They're now Shum Coda. It's a California corporation running our building department. I feel very uncomfortable with that. I think there's probably a more cost-effective way that could be done. And hopefully in the future, our new administrator and budget time can look at that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Anyone else? Yeah.
I just had a finance question, real quick. I know that our past finance officer, we thought she was working in Cassell, she was working in Excel. Now I see in the distribution, like it's all in Cassell, and that's great. And we're seeing the numbers to the various vendors, and that's something I've never seen before. And I remember that we also got the program of ClearGov like years ago and we paid like 7,000 or 8,000 for it and I think we have used it, well, we haven't used it, but we paid for it through the years. And I was wondering if ClearGov is gonna read Cassell and, integrate it together. So, because we have, spent quite a bit of money on that Cassell, which hadn't been used for about 10 years, probably 120,000, given it's 1,200 a month. And I was just wondering that. So,
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, let's move on to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
So seconded.
All right, we have millions of seconds. It works. All right, any discussion? Yes.
I would like to ask the disbursements be removed from the consent agenda so that I could explain some of the changes that we have
Oh,
to
I
it.
don't think you need to remove them to do that.
Well, here's why else I would like them to be removed, is because the public cannot make comments on the consent agenda. And I think that the public has questions on disbursements, they should have the opportunity to ask questions. It's their money we're spending. So,
Okay,
and I'll make a future motion to have them taken out permanently, but today especially.
yeah, you can make, yes.
I think for consent agenda, if you have any discussion at all, it has to go to the regular agenda.
Yeah, and that's what you were saying, yeah.
So I'd like to make a motion for disbursements to be removed from the consent agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. All right. Anything else? All right, we have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. So I guess next is disbursement.
So for the trustees, you'll see that, and I believe there's copies on the back table, in the disbursements, we have a ledger, the ledger of, and let me get to disbursements. What I wanted to point out is if you scroll down to the last page, which gives the, hang on, I gotta get there myself.
26,
Thank you. What was it?
26.
26?
Oh, I'm sorry, last page, sorry, that's the first page.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, the last page that I wanted to refer to was, it's on 41 and spills into 42. So the first thing I wanted to bring up is there is a credit shown on the bottom of page 41 of 3,072.76, which I was curious as to why that was there. And I just wanted to explain it's there because Cooley's was paid $6,000 some for the new air conditioner in the police office, and in our invoices, it looked as though both were paid last time, but only one was paid last time, but yet our invoicing in this leftmost column is showing the full cost of $6,000 for that. And we actually have paid for half of it, and it's credited. So that's why you see that difference in the two columns, which is a difference of 3,000. So I'll explain that. And then the trustees and the public that have things on the back page, we had to do 2 more payments of invoices since this disbursements was put in the agenda packet, and we learned that professional management systems, there was a email snafu, and we were not getting their invoices. So we're now paying for both of the invoices from professional management services, and they are the folks helping us with our budget and reconfiguring into the cell. And that will come to a total of an additional $7,056.25 on disbursements. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Yes. Trustee Keating?
We mentioned this quite a while ago, when we saw individual employees, we wanted to see what department they were in. And when we look at page 41 and 42, there's GL account numbers, but we don't know what account that is. So that's what the verbiage for the account would be would make a lot more sense, because I haven't memorized what I want number.
And so let me back up, because I don't know if there's a copy of all the pay that we approved. Amanda, is there a paper copy back there?
I can go get one.
Well, it didn't make it into the agenda packet, and so the new, yeah, the new counting of the pay for each person does have the name of the department they work for. in their pay stubs. Now, as far as the GL, at this point, I don't know, yeah, I'll let you answer that.
So the chart of accounts numbers were really a mess. And when Michelle went through and ran a sort on them, they actually fell out exactly how they should have been had we been doing it correctly. So that means 11 years ago, they got redone. So right now, we are in the process of putting all those numbers back where they should have been, and they will make sense, but I don't know that we can tell you they're gonna make sense before the beginning of August. It was something that baffled me, because usually the chart of accounts numbers are consecutive, and they were all this jumbled thing. They actually were consecutive at one time, but then they got changed.
And if I could add to that, because I had gotten familiar with what numbers were what department. So I think that once we get our budget laid out in Cassell, it might be possible to have a little roadmap as to what number goes to what fund line. Like, I know that water is 60 and it'll stay 60.
It'll actually make sense.
But not everybody knows. So hopefully we can have a little, I'm trying to, what's it called? Like a little roadmap, there's a word for it.
Well, it'll just be obvious.
Like
I
a
mean,
legend.
Yeah, because the way they're supposed to work is the front number is like the general category, and as it goes down, it's more specific to the line item. That just got thrown out, so it's gonna be restored.
Then having there, 200 things. One, it's really hard for us to track revenues when revenues are spread out over the department. So I don't know what our trending is for our sales tax, what our trending is for the various incomes we have. And that's one thing I was a little worried when I saw that financial report. So once again, we've allocated sales tax across all those different departments instead of knowing what we're getting for sales tax. So that was one of the things I was concerned about.
Yeah, and so that will be consolidated in the general fund and then dispersed to the other funds as, but what you're asking right now is something we're expecting to have fixed at the first meeting in August.
All right, any other questions?
I have a comment. I just want to say that the reconciliation by account number, GL account number, is exactly what I was asking for like 3 years ago. And I'm super happy to see it finally being financed.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. Question from the public. All right. Yes.
I'll say something, but I agree, Thomas, the public has been asking that for years and years and years to make the budget make sense, make the financials make sense. And that has been a bane of contention for so many people. And I'm so happy that it's changing and we're on a new track. And just hoping ostensibly, I guess that's why the audit would take so long and nobody could ask the former finance officer any questions during that 7-month time. And I'm hoping that it takes probably 2 to 3 months, like it probably should, with it all being in order. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And can we get approval of the disbursements?
I'd like to make a motion to approve disbursements.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. All right, next up is the last interim town administrator report. Sigh.
Not for me. I won't have to type one of these again. Anyway, Stephen Wynn is going to do a great job. I've already been issuing him my propaganda on what I think he should do. So anyway, I just really appreciate the hard work that you put into, because I know both Nick and I have made some challenging changes, requested some challenging changes out of the board, and I think Stefan and Nick will continue to work on with those changes. And I also want to just, I mean, I keep saying it, but I hope you realize what an incredible staff you have. I've worked for a lot of cities and towns, and I think you have an exceptional staff. And one of the things I was telling Stefan today is, you know, one of the things managers run into is that people don't tell them things. And you probably have the same feeling, and that's why I always email you when there's something that you might hear about in town. So you'll know before someone says, well, I heard at the town today. You know, the staff has been so incredible. And that means weekend, night, and all kinds of texts and emails. But I always know what's going on with your staff. They always let me know what's going on. And we are always working together to come up with the correct solution. And you just have people who are really dedicated to the town of Paonia. And I think I can't emphasize enough what an asset that is. So, report on town's financial management and data. Okay, so professional management systems, they completed our financial statements for 2022. I sent those to you along with the new chart of accounts. And those will now go, those will be the basis of our audit for 2022. So Stefan will work with Michelle and Lorraine on getting that audit finished. I had a big typo in the second paragraph. The accurate and readable financial statement is the first meeting in August. We just figured out the chart of accounts at the beginning of June. That was, it's complicated because I have the way it should be, but the accountants know they still have to do fund accounting for some of those funds that we're going to do away with because we were accounting for them in 2022. So there's this transition period that we had to work out. And then Lorraine is already sitting on the Zoom. She's going to talk during our health insurance discussion. We did get we had a huge disparity in the two bids that we received, but the K&D Construction was the low bidder. Their references have checked out, and so Stefan and Nick will be working with them on a final contract, and that will be done this year, which is our goal, right? So that's good, and we have the grant funding for that. We're expecting complete funding for the hydrogeology study and spring metering soon. We did submit a planning grant for the code rewrite. It's one of the administrative grants, and we're waiting to hear from that. Stefan has a personnel handbook template that he wants to work with to replace your personnel code. And that'll have to be reviewed by Sirsa and Nick and everybody else, but that should be remedied soon because your personnel code definitely has to be rewritten. And then for water company ordinance revisions, so I know that we have a plan to be able to work with the water companies, and I think the objective is going to have to be education. I don't think there's a way that you're going to come to consensus with the water companies, because you have to look out for the town, not the water companies. They have to look out for themselves, and it's unfortunate. I mean, unfortunately for them, and I know that this isn't always well understood, is that they are receiving town system water. So I didn't comment at the last meeting, but there's got to be some realistic expectations. But I have talked to Nick, and we think it's valuable to talk with them about what their needs and concerns are. But in the end, that ordinance has to protect the town. So that I just want to mention that so we're all clear. And then my last paragraph, which is I decided that I'll just put out the bad news right away, and so people can blame me when I'm gone. Is that we are not charging water rates for out-of-town people that we should be. Our residents are subsidizing out-of-town customers. I did do a survey of the other managers, and they're almost across the board, everybody's charging 150% to their out-of-town customers. When I was in Lake City, they serve a wide area that's out of town, and they pay a much higher rate. And the reason for that is that, first of all, to the water companies, most of them, we have longer infrastructure to go to that water company than we have in town. So it's more expensive to maintain, and we maintain it up to the meter. The second part is that they're not paying what our residents are paying. Our residents are paying property tax, and that offsets costs in the town that we don't get from out-of-town people. So that's the reasoning that for out-of-town residents paying more for their services is they're not paying the amount that a resident is paying to support the town. So I'm not saying that you're making any decisions soon. This is a budget discussion that you'll have over months. But I want to introduce the topic that you should be increasing your water and sewer rates to normal out-of-town rates. And that's all I have. Just mostly bad news, but but the good news is that budget to actuals in August. And I want Stefan to send me them because I want to see them myself.
All right, questions for Leslie? Yes.
The question I had was which agency are you submitting the grant, planning grant for the code?
It goes to DOLA. It's the same money that funded our hydrogeology study.
No, that's.
We ended up not doing the 25,000 for that?
Oh, DOLA wasn't
Oh, okay.
allowing us. It's the same thing as the planning, the master planning grant.
Oh, yeah, master planning
Yeah,
and
DOLA doesn't.
Yeah.
Thank you, I just,
that money is available for studies.
Right. Anything else? Anyone else? Yes.
I just had a question as you're working with Lorraine on the finances. I was curious about how we allocate expenses across, because we know we have the town administrator's time is sometimes allocated or is allocated over the utility funds. And just getting a handle, is that being looked at closely
Yes.
as far as being realistic?
So I actually worked with the department heads to set those, and I sent them to Michelle, and I cannot find the email that I sent, because Stephanie asked that too, but there's kind of standard allocations, and I used those. In particular with Corey, I had to talk to Corey about, because law enforcement is clearly 100% general fund. With Corey's staff, individual staff members have different percentages of time they spend in the enterprise fund. So we actually worked out a formula for that. And I sent it to Michelle. Now I have to ask Michelle what I sent her, and I'll send it out to you.
Anything
send
else?
it to all of us.
Yeah, oh no, I have to send it to all of
That's
you.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
That's
Dave is
the
not, he's
rules.
special, not that.
Yeah, okay. All right. Next is Chief Clemenger.
Yeah, so June was kind of a busy month for calls for service, but I'll hit on a couple highlights. We started collecting speed data throughout town so we can evaluate those limits. It's kind of hit or miss depending on the weekends. We're collecting that data, but I'm not sure it's going to tell us exactly what we need, so we may be relying on conversations with community members, with citizens, and kind of as we lead into school here with NIFSS, with County K8, some of those who we have a lot of foot traffic and bicycle traffic to those places. But we have started that process, just takes too long. Also, we had several calls for service up at the town park last month, so we've done some increased patrols in there. That'll continue throughout the summer. It seems like, looking back at our trends, as soon as school starts, that kind of tapers off a little bit. We'll hope for something similar. I know, a thank you to with Cherry Days, they had private security that helped us with some stuff, so thank you to those guys. That was nice, and I think that's part of the reason we review those plans when they submit them. So we know, what, do they have a plan for security? Do they have people on, or their phone numbers we can call? So those aren't just rubber stamps, those get looked back by everybody, so that's good. And the last thing is, we promoted an officer to corporal. So it's Corporal William Gillian now. He'll help review reports, do some administrative stuff. He's kind of taking the lead on our training program. As I explained before, we've kind of evolved that to a little more system, a more adult learning system. And he's the driving force behind that, so happy to have him in that position.
All right, questions for the chief? I do have a comment, Chief. One of the things I attended when I was at CML was about building a positive culture in the police department. And one of the things that they brought forward during that, there were two departments, one was Lone Pine and one was, anyhow, it's in my report. But one of the things they said is when police officers are promoted, that it's good to bring them to the council and to do it in here. So next meeting, could we have Officer Gillum come in here and let's do a little ceremony promoting him?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
that would be great.
Thank you for that recognition.
Okay, next up is Mr. Heidegger. Stay there, Corey, you get up.
Joanne passed his wastewater as treatment distribution today, so I didn't have any reason to believe that it wouldn't pass, so. So now him and Jordan are kind of all as far as they can go currently with their testing, but they're still studying for credits for the next ones. But other than that, it's been a report. I haven't answered any questions.
All right, questions for Mr. Heidegger? Okay, seeing none, I think we get to go. Oh, yeah.
Just reading through his report, and I had kind of talked to him about this, but just to give a thank you out to that Crossroads Baptist
Yeah.
Church. Yeah, they
Yes.
they help us with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we did have the, I don't have the report from me and I forget the church name.
Let's go.
Crossroads Baptist Church from
Thank
Marshall,
you.
Kansas.
We had 12 volunteers that came out and helped just get the parks in shape. They did a lot of volunteer work, like 220 hours, I think is probably what we came up with. They helped us get the park trail and out the valley started and get that going. Did a lot of repainting at the town park and out the valley park. But in the bathrooms and some of the four-sided that was needed touch up. Was super thankful to have them out.
And I'm gonna add one more thing to your report. Our water treatment plant is completely repaired with new parts. And one of the things we've talked about that we could do better, and Corey and the staff are working on, is we need to have replacement parts now. So we're not waiting 2 months for them to come. So they are working on getting replacement parts. So if something like this happens again, we go to the shelf instead of call everybody in the entire state of Colorado to look for the piece.
All right, thank you very much. All right, now we're going to go to, I think, the most important item on our agenda, and that's this culmination of 6 months of hard work and an exceptional candidate, and that's the swearing in of our new town administrator, Stephanie Wynn. So
I have a question.
we're not taking questions for Mr. Heidegger from the public. All right, Mr. Wynn,
No, it was about this resolution,
we don't have no resolution.
the swearing in resolution.
We're just swearing in. We're not there yet. Can we please swear in our town administrator, Ms. Watson? All right. All right, Amanda? Mr. Wynn?
Sure.
I can move the podium if you need to, Tammy. Our town photographer and ex-town trustee.
So we actually have family and friends from 3 different states watching right
Oh,
now.
my goodness.
I think that would be really nice.
Yeah, that would.
Yeah.
How we doing this?
We're gonna, don't trip on the wires.
Yeah, watch out for
Let's not kill off any trustees.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay, you guys ready?
You got enough mic, Tammy? Okay.
Chief Manager.
Chief Manager. Leslie, I think you need to be part of this as well. Come on, guys. Have a place for you right here. Yeah.
Raise your right hand, repeat after me. I, Stephen Wynn,
I, Stephen Wynn,
affirm that I will faithfully support the Constitution of the United States,
affirm that I will faithfully support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Colorado,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Colorado,
and the laws of the town of Paonia.
and the laws of the town of Paonia.
And I will faithfully perform the duties of the office of the town administrator of the town of Paonia.
And I will faithfully
Perform
perform the duties of the office of the town administrator of the town of Paonia,
to which I have been appointed.
to which I have been appointed.
Leslie, you need to come up here too. Yeah, don't go away. Okay, guys, don't go away.
I'll just give you that.
Leslie, you don't know. We cannot express how much this in phenomenal ways. And thank you for every bit of work and every mile you have traveled and every hair you have pulled out of your head in this process.
Oh, thank you.
This is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're gonna miss you. I know you're not gone yet, but.
It's only fitting that Tammy Mack should be taking this photo. She's photographed me in other contexts.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
So Tammy Mack, Orchard Avenue, thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank Leslie. This is the absolute truth. With all due respect to those who've come before, I kept thinking, I wish a Leslie Klusmeyer would come along and straighten this town up. I've known Leslie for a long time. Our kids were born in the same hospital on the same day. I used to work for her husband and her ex-husband. And Leslie, thank you for everything. And thank you all for hiring her and keeping her here. And thank you all for continuing your wonderful hard work. Thank you so much.
Did you have a question about the resolution? I don't see a resolution in our packet.
Well, it's 7 down. The sequence is weird. But it has to do with the appointment. Can I just really quickly say this? So I guess I'm just a little confused. I'm not saying that.
Well, okay, why don't we get to it when we get to it? Okay?
Great.
All right, thank you.
It's just that he
We'll
just
get
was
there.
appointed.
Suzanne, we'll get there.
Okay.
It's more than just the town administrator, so we'll get there when we get there.
Waiting for other items.
All right, let's move on to designation of handicap parking at Town Park. All right, trustee Knutson and trustee Stelter, this is your item.
I'd like to start out.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have in town, especially during any function, is there's no handicap parking in the park or near the park. And at Cherry Days in particular, the entire section of town is full, and people that have some have mobility issues have difficulty going to the park or leaving the park. And I think that if we just designated some parking spots near the entrance of the park, we would greatly alleviate some of the problems for some of our citizens. That's it.
Okay. All right, comments from the public? Yes, Ms. Thompson?
Does anybody or any of you have an idea, a suggestion, a proposal? Where, for instance, like
Okay.
by the skate park or where it's paved and there's the entrance and it's easy access in and out of the, or is it on the other side?
Oh, we'll get there. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Hi, Amy DeLuca, German Creek. I work with the North Fork Valley Creative Coalition. As you all know, we produce a lot of events in the community. And I think thank you for bringing this up. We have, not only for our events, but I know Picking in the Park, the spots that we have used with our own signage is if you are coming into the park and the teen center is on your right, we can get about 4 to 6 handicap spots on either side of that fence. So as you're driving out on both sides, you can do about 3, and we mark it off and measure it off and put signage up there. It's worked great, and we were advised by emergency vehicles that that's a good spot for them if they also need to get in to the area so they can come around and drive through. Or so I just want to throw that out there. It's worked well for us in the past. We've never had emergencies, but the handicap folks that use that are always really grateful. So
thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Watson.
So I don't know if there are events that are held in the winter time, but I'm wondering, is there an obligation for the town to keep the handicap spots clear of snow and ice? Because in front of the teen center, there can be horrendous ice buildup. I'm not saying we shouldn't have spots there, but I know I've had to help people cross the ice before when they used to have meals there. And it can be quite dangerous. So I don't know if there's a public works obligation to that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Heider, I see you have put some words in on this about the stencil and how much it's going to cost. Did you have any input on where you think it should go?
I was actually looking at spots around the Smith Center, and have still some questions and that and stuff we need to look over as far as design. Like, do we need to have any kind of curb stops or yeah, like just trying to figure out the best spot to maximize how many we can add in one spot, but between the Smith Center and the bathrooms was the spot too that I was looking at mostly. I just don't know how many exactly we need, here for maybe on how many they normally put up for events, to at least gives me an idea what to look at as far as how many spaces, so I'll be able to go out and get some better measurements, stuff like that, to see how many we can actually fit in there legally. I can give an updated report as soon as those.
Thank you. Chief Levenger.
Yeah, so I think when we're talking, a couple things come to mind is, how many do we want to designate within the boundaries of the park when if we have an event like BMW Rally, Charity Rally, where we are allowing people to go in their park and they want to leave, and so we've got a lot of vehicle traffic where we typically would not want a lot of vehicle traffic off of pedestrian traffic, as opposed to that Fourth and Orchard area where we can designate parking. And the access into the park is pretty good. And the other area we kind of looked at, and speaking with some people who use the park, that are handicapped and some of the issues they're facing, but the other is that Fifth and North Fork area, which is down by the stage, because it's a little bit closer as opposed to trying to get all the way through the park when we have an event going on and then across all the grass and around the tables. Space is a little bit tighter over there, but there's a way we can figure something out. And the only other thing is, maybe looking at the number of spots, perhaps adding something to our, our park use where whatever's going on there may cone off some areas, so we have more available parking for handicap during those events than we would. We probably don't need 15 handicap parking spots all year long. So we don't want to go start painting half a block blue when we're not really going to make use of all that. We'd be better served to strategically place some of those less parking spaces across the park so they'd be more usable. But, these are just kind of big picture ideas.
Thanks from board, yeah. Commissioner Fittis?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is there are two kind of separate sets of needs for handicap accessibility to the park. There's the one that is kind of year-round with general park use, and then there's a separate set of needs when we have special events there. And I think Chief Leminger's suggestion that kind of echoes what Ms. Luke was saying was that we actually have a strategy to put temporary handicap parking spots when we need more for a larger event. But I think what we're talking about right now is just considering the daily use of the park and how many and where those should go. And I'm curious, and this might be just kind of an open question for the board, in a resolution or a motion that we make, I'm not sure that we actually, as a board, have to designate where those parking spots go and how many there are. We just have to ask for those parking spots to be, created.
Right. Your big moment. Anything else from the board? Anything else?
Sounds good.
Okay, and would somebody like to make a motion? Oh, come on, guys.
Okay, I'll make a
I'd like to
motion.
make a motion that we direct staff to make appropriate arrangements for handicap parking at Town Park.
Very good. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, further discussion?
I'd kind of like to modify that to say permanent and temporary spots in that motion, because
That's what appropriate means.
Yeah,
okay,
okay, all right.
Is it appropriate?
Oh, my God, absolutely.
So if I could I ask for an amendment to this motion to designate me as the town administrator as the ADA coordinator? Okay. So I don't know if you have one, so you might as well.
Well, why don't we actually make that a separate motion? All right, so we have a motion and a second on the table. We do get a second. Okay, motion and a second on the table to have staff. I forgot.
Designate appropriate handicap parking for Town Park.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to have staff designate appropriate handicap parking with town park. All right, all in favor?
aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Now, can we give the
I'd like to make a motion that we designate our town administrator as our ADA coordinator.
Can we get a second on that?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes as well. All right, let's move on to discussion and decision. Okay, discussion and decisions on parking at the top of America and Vista Drive.
Madam Mayor, in the interest of this item, no representative from Green Vista or Pan American is here at this time. Or are they? I don't see anyone. From either of those owners. I don't know. I want to make sure that both homeowners associations in Green Vista and also Pan American are either online or available for comment. Because this impacts them.
Well, then I would suggest that if this would move to the next agenda, you make sure that they are here. Otherwise, we will discuss it at the next meeting and
I'll
make a
motion
decision.
to continue this item.
All right,
I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, then Mr. Knudsen, let's make sure they're here or we're gonna act on it instead of continually moving this on. All right. Huh? All right. Consider a mid-block pedestrian crosswalk on Grand Avenue. Gentlemen, you're up again.
Is it my turn?
Your turn.
Madam Mayor, essentially, I didn't document this properly. What we're trying to do is get a crosswalk between the two handicap signs. And in order to do that, that does not decrease any parking. We have a letter to effect concern about this crosswalk now taking parking spaces away. And essentially what we're trying to do, and anyone at Grand Avenue can see that on both sides of the street, there's handicap parking right across from each other. So just designating a crosswalk between the two handicap parking spaces. I wanted to correct documentation. So that's what the sign was about. It's not a diagonal as I had originally written between Town Hall and Polis Park. That doesn't make sense.
Okay. Comments from the public? Yes, Ms. White.
I just want to say, and we had people come about our speed signs, people who live here who didn't realize what the speed limit was throughout town because there were no signs. And in Colorado, the law is that you have to stop and yield for pedestrians. But I think what might be confusing is that you have a stop sign with a crosswalk on each end of the block, and then a crosswalk in the middle of the block. And we have tourists coming from out of town, and I'm not sure they're going to understand that they actually have to stop there too. That being said, I think we've heard that the more you have to pay attention to where you're going, the safer things are. And that can be said for pedestrians. I think jaywalking has worked rather well. I think there's an understanding that jaywalkers yield for traffic. And if you want the traffic to yield for you, you go to the crosswalk at either end. But I think it's going to make it more confusing downtown to start inserting another crosswalk. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, expect.
Sherry Patterson, Rio Grande. Kind of going in the same direction as Suzanne. It makes more sense to move the handicap parking to the corners of the crosswalk. You already have a large space on either side. With those parking spaces next to that large space that is adjacent to the actual existing crosswalk, then making something in the center of a relatively short block. So the same thing, people are stopping, starting, stopping again, starting. It's a lot of confusion, even for townspeople, not just for the visitors.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, discussion by board. Oh, Mr. Mark, or Trustee Marco.
Yeah, I was wondering, where exactly we're talking about here? Like a map or a further description might be helpful, because all I have to go on is mid-block pedestrian crosswalk.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Well, doesn't work. Why don't we just walk out in the street and look at it?
That is not a bad idea.
Thanks, Dave.
We're churning to the street.
Right there. I'm gonna try to keep you. Well, Is the tree of crosswalk?
Yeah, it's just right.
What they did is
You just put a.
Disabled near town hall.
Oh, I thought we were talking about
Well, yeah. Put the crosswalk where it goes. Right there.
My car, just my car, and nobody else.
Disabled park.
Oh, the corner. Oh.
So that's where the crosswalk would be.
Oh, it's over there.
I don't know, because the idea of moving it to the corner has some appeal. But I
They
do
better not have a
also
discussion.
that the town hall is You know, it's not like the.
Let's go stop it.
It is business.
So,
Yeah.
so even then, you say you're handicap parking?
That's what
No,
she
I
is.
said,
That's
yeah,
what she said.
because at the corners, you're already stopped. Where my neighbors stop. At the corners also, there's a big space before the parking stop.
Right, yes.
Now there's it's that.
Yeah, I read like a Rio
Yeah,
right there.
right. Do you need a ramp? No, they don't have a ramp. They don't have a ramp, but don't even say. I just don't know how the procedure for this.
Yeah. I did like the idea of putting that on the event day, having some designated. Some
Yeah.
special, but otherwise, you don't need it, yeah. I mean, I go to the park quite a bit. And I don't see it.
But anyway, so there's space, and then just move the party to adjacent to that space. No, are you saying that the only reason we need a crosswalk is because of the parking? Or no, you're not connected. You're not, just use the crosswalk. Do you know what's the idea of crosswalk? Like, are you there? What? I mean, really, I always think it's too cold and hurts.
It's chilling down.
Never too cold.
You need to live in an ice box.
I did.
Oh, yes, you did, you did. This is.
In North Dakota?
Yeah.
It is.
Just gonna get
What you
antsy
brought up
and-
is, I saw
What, did we lose trustees in?
Yeah.
What, they're outside?
Oh, no.
Are
Really?
they outside?
It can't be discussed. No discussion.
Oh, my
We'll see.
I'm old.
Now that we have done show and tell, discussion from the board, I only do something.
I have something to say, and my point is, when you're in a crosswalk, the cars need to see that you're in the curb. You shouldn't have to go.
Excuse me, no, let's not have discussions.
All right,
Thank you.
and my concern is that because there are cars parked on either side, on both sides of the street, and I've been looking at this driving back up and down, people are not gonna see me on the curb when there are cars parked here and here. I'm gonna have to go out to where the end of those cars are to let them know I wanna use the crosswalk. So I think it's, I think it's, won't serve the right purpose unless we make it so people can see you coming down the road and move parking and move spaces. I do believe we're gonna lose parking spaces. So,
Okay, other discussion? Yeah, trustee.
Thanks. So following up on my question, having the field trip there, the spots are the handicap parking spot directly in front of Town Park and kind of in front of 223. And then directly across the street from that, in front of 224, there's an unmarked, or I guess it has a sign, but not no stripes and no placard or anything. Yeah, the curb is painted blue and there's a sign above it. It's also a handicap parking spot. So I could conceive of the, I'm not sure if there's a proper name for it, but the loading zones, like the van loading areas, where the curb ramps are being converted into, it would make kind of a zigzag, actually, if you went from one and then across, just looking at it from the satellite, it's not straight across, but kind of goes up and over. So it wouldn't really take away any parking spots. I would assume that it would be okay for ADA compliance because while it's being unloaded, you can kind of walk around it, there's enough room for it to work there. What we'd have to do is just stripe the sidewalks and use the stencil that we're gonna get anyway to mark that. I think it totally works. Regarding trustee Smith's comment, if you are on the walkway would be on the traffic side of whatever car. So there would be a ramp and a width, like if it's already a parking spot width, that you would be able to step out into, so that you'd be able to be visible by traffic. I don't think it would be that dangerous.
In the middle of the street or at the intersection?
I'm sorry. It would be at the edge of the parking zone, like, basically like if you're crossing the street anyway, you know, if you're jaywalking, which everybody does anyway.
I would ask the town administrator when, as our ADA compliance officer, would putting a crosswalk through what is now a handicap parking spot, how would that affect that?
Having gone out there, and actually seen what was being discussed, I wouldn't recommend doing it as described. You've got angle parking, and so in that particular area, so you've got angle parking that would back out into the path of somebody going to the crosswalk. So now if things were moved 90 degrees and maybe perpendicular, you might actually get more parking spaces along the entirety of Grand Avenue, and those ADA ramps actually line up. So it could be restriping, but I couldn't recommend doing some sort of crosswalk right there. I'd have to look at it a little bit further. This would be something potentially to be tabled for another meeting until we have more information, at least a map or a diagram for everybody to review the packet.
Thank you. Anything else from the board? Rusty McGinnis.
Well, I just want to mention that, considering the traffic patterns of Grand, you know, we have two, handicap parking spots across the street from one another, and if one of them is full, and you park in a spot that's across the street from where you want to go, let's say you park in front of Polis Park, but your destination is actually Indigo Autumn. As it stands now, without jaywalking, then you'd have to kind of go to the end of one of the blocks and cross and then come back. And so I think in an attempt to link up those two handicap parking spaces to reduce the amount of travel that one of those people would potentially have to do, I think is a noble effort. I don't know if we've quite gotten there, but I think it's noble that we continue kind of in this vein.
I'd like to make a motion to continue this item.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion passes. All right, next is a warning. Ratifying the health insurance employer contributions. All right. Yeah.
I'd like, since this is a night of public apologies, I'd like to also apologize. So the last meeting, I rode 460 miles from one board meeting in Flagstaff to get here late and jumped into something with erroneous information. I had been out in the public sector for 30 years, and back when I was in the public sector, we didn't pay a whole lot of the employee thing. Our interim town administrator has forwarded to us the CML survey, and I was surprised to see that I was completely wrong in the way I was looking at employee insurance, and that when I looked at comparable towns, and I looked at towns in Delaware County, the generosity of the individual jurisdictions was very high with the employees. They were paying anywhere from 80 to 100%, as our interim town administrator had mentioned during that meeting. So I wanted to apologize for creating the confusion that I did. I think our recommendations are in line.
Okay. Input from the public.
Do you want me to do a staff report, or do you do this first?
Well, we don't have any input from the public, so go ahead, Ms. Kuzmeyer.
Okay, so I stuck with my recommendation, which is basically what I'm calling a cafeteria plan. You just allot employees a certain amount of money. If they want the higher plan, they pay the premium more, but the employees that are on the lower cost system get more paid. And So that's what I'm recommending. Lorraine Trotter is on the phone and she's been waiting patiently. Lorraine is the president of Professional Management Solutions, and I know the question has been for you and for me, how much money do we really have in reserves? Because that's been a mystery, but she's going to explain why we've come to the conclusion you have enough money in terms that are more easy to understand. So Lorraine, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Kugler. Good evening, Mayor and trustees. It's nice to meet you via Zoom, and I'm happy to be with you tonight. I would like to tell you kind of when I got this call about what should we do we have enough money, the first thing I did was look at your last audit, and that was done in 2021. Right now, most places are working on 2022, so it's the most recent audit that many places have. And I was glad, as an aside, to know that you had that audit, because you had some problems and some issues with your finances that we're working on. But knowing that your auditors were able to take the data that you do have and do a full-fledged audit and give you a clean opinion for 2022 gave me a lot of confidence that we would very quickly be able to get things caught up and in shape and audited for 2022. So when looking at changing an expense that's going to go on for many years, you want to look at not only what money you have now, but how it's been growing or decreasing and how it's going to be needed in the future. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to share my screen. Would you be able to see it if I do that?
We're conferring, hang on.
Oh, there you go.
Is that visible to everyone? Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, you are, yes.
Okay, so this is your 2021 audit. It was your annual financial statements, and it means that these auditors came in and reviewed everything that the city had, that the town had. And I don't know if anyone has gone through this with you, but on page 4 is where the auditor's opinion is, saying that they did audit everything. And in the second paragraph, that's where you want to see this language that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects, the respective financial positions of the governmental activities, the business type activities, each fund, etc. So you can rely on these financial statements as very solid starting points in making any of your decisions until such time as you have current financial reports, which is starting to happen. So in this audit, there's a lot of pages, but I want to send you first to the balance sheet. And if you have a copy of this at home or later want to look at it, we're on page 19. And this shows the balance sheet for 3 of your fund types, which is the general fund, your sales tax capital improvement fund, and some non-major funds that get folded together here. And I want to show you the assets for the general fund, which is where most of your employees are housed, so to speak, for expenses. Ended the year at $1.5 million. And you had some liabilities due, but after you take those away from the $1.5 million, you had $980,000 in your fund balance at the end of the year in 2021. So we go forward 2 pages to page 24. We look at your income statement, which shows your revenues and your expenditures, and say, well, all right, there's $980,000. And again, that's on the bottom at the ending fund balance. And is this large enough? Should I enlarge it? Is that better?
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Okay. The general fund had revenues come in 2021 of $1.4 million, and you had expenditures going out of $1 million, $1,036,000. So you had an excess revenues over your expenditures of $409,000 in 2021. You also got a transfer in. So your revenues and expenditures went up by this third number from the bottom, the $417,214 in 1 year, in 2021. And you had a beginning fund balance of about $500,000. So in 1 year, you almost doubled that and you went up to $980,000. Since you don't have a lot of good financial reports right now, you could rely on this as a starting point for 2022, and you would know if there was a big fluctuation in 2022 that would change this trajectory so that it wouldn't be similar at the end of 2022 or now in 2023. So if suddenly your expenses went way up, or if suddenly your revenues dropped down and they weren't going to recover, then you couldn't rely on increasing the building of your fund balance. But if things are, pretty much the same, you can expect that you would be increasing your fund balance again in 2022, and that you already have $980,000 to begin with. I like to look at that number and compare it to what your expenditures are. And you have almost $1 million in ending fund balance, and your annual expenditures are $1 million. So you have almost enough in fund balance to fund a whole year, even if you had zero revenues coming in. And so I point that out to say, to me, as somebody who looks at a lot of small towns' budgets and audits, this looks pretty healthy, and it's definitely trending in the right position. So if the insurance that you want to add were to be, let's say it were $200,000 in expenses, I don't know what it is, then this and everything else stayed the same, you'd still go up at the end of the year by $217,000. So it looks healthy to me that you have a big cushion that's building of revenues coming in over expenditures in your general fund. In your general fund. I will go forward to the enterprise funds because you have some employee salaries that get charged there as well, and so with their benefits. So here's the balance sheet for the water, sewer, and trash funds. And these also show their capital assets, which is most of them. Most of the total assets are in capital. You can't spend those plants and equipment and pipes, but you have healthy current assets in each of these operating funds of $814,000 in the water and the sewer. And then you have current liabilities, which are much less than that in the water, sewer, and trash. So you have good net position or good fund balances, that would be called if they were governmental funds, in these funds as well. So at the bottom, it shows your total net position. A lot of it is invested in capital assets, and some of it's reserved for debt service, but you have a lot of unrestricted money that can be used for any of your operations, including employee wages and insurance. That's the balance sheet. And if we just look at the operating statement for these enterprise funds, you have a similar story that we saw with the governmental funds and the general fund. You see revenues came in at $1 million for water, $500,000 for sewer, et cetera. Expenses went out at lesser amounts. And so each of these funds had net income from operations, which means the bottom line grows when you have net income. So again, if you had $100,000 in, let's say you had $50,000, so it's probably more reasonable, in the employees that were tracked here as far as what was going to be increased for their health insurance, it would detract a little bit from this in water, but it certainly wouldn't wipe out that operating income. Down at the bottom, you again have net income growing in each of these funds from 150,000 in water, 36 in sewer, and a slight loss in trash, but that's because of a transfer out. So this net income before transfers out, there was a transfer out of $9,561 from one fund to another for whatever reason that was. So that's a brief analysis of what we know happened by the end of 21 and how things were looking in all of your funds. And unless you know of a change and that things aren't going that direction, I think you could rely on that trend as being very favorable and allowing you to start spending money that you need to spend to attract and retain good employees if that's what you need to do. I would say as an aside that both Michelle and that Michelle has told me repeatedly how impressed she is with your staff as well, when she's been working with them. And that is a real positive.
Thank you, Lorraine. I don't know about the rest of the board, but that was incredibly enlightening and reassuring to me.
Thank you.
So, the impact of this is actually, from what I can tell from our budget, and it's very hard for me to accumulate because things are spread out everywhere. I think that you budgeted for 19 full-time employees. There are 22 full-time employees listed in the budget, but we only have 17 full-time employees and we're fully staffed. So I think that you actually budgeted more in salaries and health insurance than you would have ever spent, if that makes sense. So that gives you already a cushion. And on top of that, because we've adopted this new plan, which is, you know, kind of a municipal pool and benefit pool, we are getting that insurance at a reduced cost from what we used to have. And it's, the structure is completely different, which I think I had a hard time explaining. So what I tried to do is figure for you what your total premium is, which before you had budgeted $228,061. The total premium based on what I had for the registration for the employees and their plans was going to be $182,076. And that comes out to be, for the town, under the board directed proposal, it would have been, the town would have paid, excuse me, I think I'm mixing up here. Oh, the total premium per employee would be $12,138. This is annually. And then the town share would be, under the board directed option, $9,397, and the employee would be $2741. Under my recommendation, this is just the flat rate. It would be $10,800 for the town share, which is more than the board direction, and $1,338 for the employee share. One of the problems is that you already know is that I think that you budgeted exactly what you thought you budgeted, which is 50% of the dependents and 90% of the employees, but that's not what we've been paying. So the employees have been paying a much less amount than they usually would have made, and now we're making a big change for them. So Nick is going to talk a little bit about the liabilities of when we make an insurance change like this. And you know, you're in an unusual situation where something else got implemented besides what you approved. So we can't fix that. We are fixing it now.
Yeah.
That's going to take it the whole thing.
Okay, Lorraine, would you stop sharing your screen, please?
Yes.
Thank you. So, all right, Mr. Pottenbach.
Yeah, and thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to share briefly my concerns, and I think there is a bit of a gray area here because the board's intent was gone against when it came to what actually was put into practice. But typically with local government health plans, there's a summary of benefits that's provided to each employee, and they receive those benefits at the beginning of the plan year. And when there's a substantial change to that plan, they're entitled to some period of notice. And the notice is typical, the typical notice is 60 days. So to reduce a benefit, and we're talking here about the town's contribution to premiums, is a substantial change, is considered a substantial change under the law to the employee benefits. Thus, I think the safest thing here to do for the board from the perspective of, you know, protecting the town against liability would be to give 60 days notice of any change that results in a reduction of the employer premiums, the employer contribution to premiums. And if the board does not do that, I think there's an argument that this plan change was never approved. The town can certainly assert that argument. The board can certainly assert that argument. But I'm not sure that it's in the town's best interest to do so. But it's such a gray area that I cannot give you a clear, definitive answer on what the outcome would be if the board were challenged. So that's my very high level legal analysis on the issue.
And I know Trustee Knudsen talked about what other towns are paying. You actually are paying on the low side. I would let that go till your next budget. You can talk about what you want to pay on it. We just got to solve this year. So I appreciate that. And if you want to look at the compensation survey, all 400 pages of it, it's very interesting. Matt read the whole thing.
It is interesting.
Go. Yes, Tracy.
So for the other trustees that received the, it's on page 186. So you don't have to go all the way through, but you can look at 186 and see that the employee share. So I don't think we're in danger of having to violate the 60-day notice if we keep things, because our interim town administrator's recommendation is to keep things as they are, if I'm understanding that correctly. That essentially with the new policy, the amount of reimbursement stays pretty much the same, is that correct?
It would for the employees at the lowest level, yes, at the lowest level of an insurance plan. So our plan is basically what I propose is that we pay 100% on, because they get an option of 3 plans. 100% of the lowest plan cost for the employee, and then that flat rate, which I think is $100 to $200 off of the more dependents.
Next
And this is very confusing and complicated. It took me forever to do the spreadsheet. Our old plan, you had to pay per person. Our new plan, you pay, there's 4 things: employee only, employee plus spouse, employee plus child, employee plus family. You don't have, it doesn't matter how many, like you could have 12 children. You're still employee plus family. And that's one rate. So that's kind of how it works. And I think from what I heard, the employees were pretty happy with that. This is a big transition. And they also had the shock of realizing that they had been paying differently than everybody thought they were paying. So I think this works for the next 6 months. And then we did check, and employees can change their plan in January, depending on what you decide in the budget.
So Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we accept Stewart's recommendations on insurance.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion by the board? All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. Thank you again for all your hard work on this. And thank you, Trustee Knudsen.
I stayed up on this.
Yeah. I did a lot of reading on that subject too. All right, moving on. Consideration and approval of resolution 10-23 roles and responsibility of committees. All right, so we've been round and round on this one for a while too. Well, down quite nicely. All right. Who wants to take the lead on this one?
I'm gonna turn it over to Nick.
That's what I.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it. And what's before you tonight, Mayor and trustees, is just a very high level resolution that would sort of set the parameters of roles and responsibilities of committees, and basically saying that committees serve the purpose of advising the board. I mean, it's a subset of the board that has been broken off essentially to give advice on specific tasks or give advice on specific subject matter. So let me pull up the actual resolution so that I can give you a little bit more. So the advisory capacity essentially means that you're advising the board, you're acting as liaison, and you can't make decisions on behalf of the town. Those are certainly reserved to the Board of Trustees within the board's legislative authority. But also in that advisory capacity, these committees don't have authority to direct town staff. That authority is reserved to the Board of Trustees as a whole, and then sometimes delegated to the administrator, often delegated to the administrator. So you basically have the authority to, as we've talked about before, to direct the town administrator, to direct the police chief as your direct report, the town attorney as well. But you don't have any authority as a committee even to direct those direct reports that I just mentioned, because you're only a subset of the board. So that's what subsection A really means. And then the board performs only such activities or duties that have been assigned to them by motion or resolution of the Board of Trustees. What right now we're currently working on, and thank you to those of you who submitted specific roles and responsibilities of your respective committees, because we're working on reviewing those and we're going to bring those back to the board with our comments. But those resolutions, separate resolutions, will further inform this subsection B. So if you'd like to have certain broad authorities, roles, and responsibilities that of course don't contradict anything in this resolution, then you'd want to set those forth in a subsequent resolution, like the ones we're talking about that are more specific to the respective committees, so that you have that authority already delegated to the committees without having to do it by motion each time. So that's really what that stands for. And it also serves as a limiting factor. The board might not want its certain subcommittees performing certain tasks and duties that haven't been assigned by the board. One, it's inefficient, and then two, there's a lot of risk involved with committee anything unless it's advice to the board, because committees really don't have any authority to act. So it's important to have those limiting factors. And then subsection C basically just says that the trustees as a whole won't assign to a board committee an activity or duty that interferes, with the duties of any town officer or employee. And that's just to uphold your organizational structure, to maintain the efficiencies of the town and to protect the town from liability. You don't want two, whether it's a body or an individual, you don't want two of those entities to be performing the same task. That overlap is one, not productive, and then it's also could give rise to liability. So in any case, that's what this resolution serves to do if the board were to adopt it tonight. And then, like I said, we will bring back those specific descriptions of the respective committees at a future meeting so that the board can have adequate time to consider go over them and then potentially adopt them as well. Thank you.
Okay, comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, discussion from the board. Oh, I'm sorry. Mrs. Watson?
So I might have just missed it. Forgive me if you already said this, Nick. So are we talking about what's coming after the resolution too right now? Or we're just talking about the resolution? Okay,
Thank you. All right, discussion from the board. Yeah, sure, trustee Knudsen.
Two questions for you, Nick. First of all, I think it's been helpful that the committees have had a posting requirement when their meetings are, because that's about transparency and making sure that the public is aware of these things are happening, that the committees are happening. And I didn't see that as a requirement in the resolution. And I really think for the interest of the public and for the public to be able to see what's going on, there should be a requirement that the committees properly post their meetings according to the way it's required by state law. Even if only 2 trustees are there, a 3rd trustee is then free to be able to show up and participate, and it's not a problem that way. Plus, it's more transparent. The second, it's not clear who appoints who to committees and how that's done. And it seems like that should be included in the resolution too. Does the mayor appoint people to committees? Do people self-appoint to committees? So those are 2 things for me that are missing in that. And then the last point I want to make is, in our report for law enforcement, we asked some real crucial questions that the board needs to consider. So as you're looking at law enforcement, there's a lot of confidentiality that goes along with that. And so we added some questions to our committee report that you need to consider and give us guidance on as we work in law enforcement. So, but that's later on down the road. The main thing here, who appoints and posting requirements.
Okay, so as far as noticing goes, the open meetings law requires you to notice meetings at which 3 or more board members will attend. So you're not actually required to notice these meetings unless it is reasonably anticipated that a trustee would show up. You'd have to end the meeting if a 3rd trustee were to show up. And perhaps that's not in the committee's interest to do that. So perhaps that's something that should be considered in the resolution. The real intent, just so you know, and I'm not saying this shouldn't be added, but the real intent was just to sort of set the parameters of what these roles and responsibilities look like so that these other resolutions could flow from this general framework. But not opposed to that, I actually had something about the appointment issue in this resolution at the outset. And if you remember the longer resolution that we had proposed earlier, that was concerning these board committees and then also citizen advisory committees, had contained some provisions on that specific issue. I'll just say generally, I'm certainly not opposed to adding the appointment. I think that's a good idea. I'll just say generally, though, that getting back to the authority that the board holds, unless authority is delegated specifically to the mayor, for example, to appoint someone, the board retains that authority. So, and no individual board member has any right to make a decision on the part of the board as a whole. So it stands to reason that the whole board would have to appoint committees by majority vote. But certainly may be worth adding to this resolution. And then trustee, on your last point about information gathering and in speaking with the chief of police and confidentiality, I think that's an interesting point that might be a little bit at odds with allowing the public to show up at some of these committee meetings, specifically the public safety meeting. And it's not unlawful to have a committee of 2 trustees lawfully appointed to the committee to meet with the chief of police. That's certainly okay, and that meeting could happen behind closed doors without any noticing. So if there was a specific, if we wanted to specifically handle the public safety committee in a way that the certain noticing requirements aren't applicable to it, those might be appropriate to address in a resolution that's more specific to the public safety committee. And maybe in this resolution, if we were to address the public noticing requirements, we could say subject to the requirements of individual committees as developed by the board by resolution, something along those lines. So all of these things could be addressed, and I will leave it up to the board whether they would like to see any of those things added to this resolution. Thank you.
Nick, question for you. I presume this resolution applies to the Paonia Tree Board as well?
So it doesn't, and the reason why is we were only specifically looking at the committees that the board had formed, sort of subcommittees that are formed with just 2 trustees. And then also, of course, you have your public attendance when they are open to the public. So the tree board is actually codified and passed by ordinance and is in existence due to the passage of an ordinance. So it's not something that can actually be changed or addressed in a resolution unless it's consistent with that ordinance. The tree board's specific duties are set forth in that ordinance, so that's something that went beyond the scope of this particular resolution.
Thanks.
Trustee Smith.
I noticed that one of the committees is not in the resolution, and that's the water sewer trash committee. And I would like to put out a potential discussion about a committee that was inactive before we switched to all these, and it was governmental affairs, public safety. And I liked the governmental affairs part of that because that really is not covered here. It's kind of governance, and it was more of a catch-all that I think we're lacking in this current setup. So I'd kind of like us to think about that a little bit more. Maybe when you get into the separate resolutions per committee.
So would anyone like to make a motion about changing this resolution and adding stuff to this resolution?
Mayor, you're looking at me.
You have all the ideas, Mr. Trustee Connington.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that the resolution be adopted with the following amendments, that posting requirements and I don't think, given, well, I'm talking about law right now. Given Nick's advice, it sounds like the appointments are made by the entire board, so there's not a need to have anything like that. So the only thing I would add to it is that committee meetings are posted.
Well, I might disagree with you on that because I don't know if it's codified anywhere, but it has been ever since I've been on the board and probably since Neil Schwederman was on the mayor, that the mayor has appointed. So it really does need to, because it has been a long, at least tradition that the mayor appointed these, then it really should be codified.
So let me restate the motion. If I may.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to propose that we adopt resolution 10-2023, adopting rules concerning activities of committees established by the Board of Trustees with 2 amendments. An amendment regarding posting requirements of the committee meetings, an amendment that appointments to the committees are made by the full board.
Okay, got a second.
I'll second that.
Okay. Yes.
Well, my discussion, could you add in that the water sewer trash should be added?
Let's get to that one through the committee resolutions.
Right.
Well, no, it's not, it's missing. The whereas does not include, we're missing a committee in the whereas. So that's why, and I would like to talk about this noticing. It would be very difficult for the finance committee to notice our meetings. Because we are ad hoc. We show up when suddenly something needs to be signed. I don't feel like, and that could maybe be dealt with specifically on the finance committee and an exception made, but that would be very difficult for us to do that.
Yeah,
I guess my concern about the noticing is that it makes the meetings, the committees official, and it's not the full board. It's just 2 trustees. You shouldn't be telling staff how to do the reports or anything in these meetings. So that's my problem with the noticing, is when you get other people there, then it becomes this sort of community meeting with staff, which is, in my opinion, not a good idea. And it goes back to that org chart that I gave you with the arrows going all over the place. And this is the guy that directs the staff right here. That's it. With exception of the police chief, but he still is involved with the police chief and personnel and other kinds of issues, so.
yes, Trustee McKinney.
If I'm hearing trustee Knudsen properly, I think the pro that he's trying to get at is to allow other board members, if they want to attend community meetings, to attend and be part of that process, as acting as possibly a citizen of the public and not in an official board capacity. But I think given that comment, the cons kind of outweigh the pros of allowing one of us to show up creates perhaps more kind of cons than we think.
Trustee Markle?
Yeah, in my experience, there have been a couple of meetings in the advisory water committee where we had 2 trustees at some points, and most of the time it's fine, you know, just to say, okay, we got 2 trustees and we kind of have a discussion. These weren't happening recently, but on occasion, we would have a 3rd trustee interested in a topic. And so we would just notice those meetings where we had some communication beforehand and say, okay, you know, we're going to be discussing this and something that I'm interested in. So let's make sure that we notice that so that we can create, you know, a public meeting, and then it becomes all legal. So I think that compulsory noticing might be difficult, but it's not really difficult to say, okay, we're going to have this is a big topic, let's make it noticed. So rather, I don't know if I want to modify the motion if you want to do it, but take that first part out, the first amendment.
Other comments from the board? Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 10/2023 with,
Madam Mayor,
yeah,
I'd like to make an addition to that, or a modification of the resolution. On the first whereas, there's an and there. I'm assuming that we have a clerical error and water, sewer, trash committee was just left off. And I'd like to add that in on that particular part.
all right. So we have an amendment to add water, sewer, and trash to the first whereas.
Second.
All right, all in favor of adding water, sewer, trash to the first whereas?
Aye.
All right, that's it. All right, back to the main motion. We have a main motion to adopt the resolution with posting requirements and the requirement that the board appoints members to the committees. All in favor? Opposed? All right, on another.
You're like Trustee Markle.
All right, somebody want to make another motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt resolution 10/23 with the amendment that the water sewer trash committee is there and that their appointment by the full board.
Okay,
I'll second that.
all right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. All right, yes, Trustee Martin.
Yeah, I'm going to in addition, I just moved it in resolution 10/2023. We add water, sewer, trash to the first whereas.
You already did that,
That was an amendment to the first one. That didn't pass.
but trustee Knudsen added it with his
Oh, did
second
it?
motion.
I missed it, sorry. Got it. Thank you, thank you.
All right, next we're at consideration and approval of resolution 2023, appointment of officer, town administrator, and treasurer. All right. Who wants to talk about this one?
Are you taking public comment first?
Well, we'll get a little presentation from whoever is presenting, and then we'll take public.
I can do it, Mayor. Yeah, so this is just a resolution to appoint Stefan as the town administrator officially and also as town treasurer. As you can see in the recitals, there are some provisions regarding what the board did when it came to appointing Leslie also as treasurer. We talked about then why that would be advantageous to the town as a whole and most efficient. Same goes here for that specific issue. I think I know what Citizen Watson is going to say. And I think it was a little unconventional that the oath took place prior to the formal appointment. But I do think it is form over substance. This probably should have come first on the agenda. But I think anyone, who came back and looked at this meeting would understand that, the oath was taken and the appointment was made all together. That results in something that works and that achieves the aim of the appointment and the oath. So I certainly understand the ordering of the agenda, and I think that's something that take a closer eye at, take a close look at. So with that, I think the resolution is pretty self-explanatory, so I'll hand it back over to the board. Thank you.
All right, citizen comment. Ms. White.
Well, thank you for that. It did get to part of mine. But the question I'm having, getting my mind around, is Title 31-4-304. And at the very end, it says, and no appointment of any officer shall continue beyond 30 days after compliance with section 31-4-401 by the members of the succeeding Board of Trustees. So to me, we used to have an ordinance that allowed for the appointment of the town administrator, and we got rid of all the unnecessary appointments that were not specified by state statute. So we weren't in the position of hiring, but having a contract, but also like appointing. So to me, this says that when the new board gets seated next spring, if you're appointing this position, they can get rid of the appointment. I mean, if you have a contract, I can see you use the contract, but to start combining the systems, I think is a little bit confusing. Is that understandable?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. White. All right. You ready to get a motion?
You're not going to answer that? My concern?
No. Listen. All right. Can we get a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 08-2023 as it stands.
Second.
Discussion from the board? Yeah.
Yeah, regarding Ms. Watson's comment, that scenario is something that I reviewed in the past and had questioned a previous attorney about, and my understanding is that employment law supersedes in fact whatever we say. Basically, when someone becomes an employee, there are laws in place that make it very difficult to try and like say the next board wants to remove or like end that contract. It doesn't work that way.
Anything else from the board? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. Next, we have consideration and approval of resolution 09-2023, authorized signature on accounts. More housekeeping. So we have to change the signatures on the accounts and we have to add Mr. Winfrey.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt resolution 09-2023.
Second,
I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you. All right. Now we have opportunity to attend Colorado Growing Water Smart Workshop in October. All right, this was forwarded.
Remote meetings.
What?
Remote meetings.
You just wanted.
Oh,
9.
oh, I'm sorry. Duh. All right, remote meetings and participation. All right. This one's more lengthy than the others. Mr. Gartenbais, you're up again.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I lost my packet here. Let me pull that back up. So I'll just start. Once I find this, I'll be able to speak a little bit more articulately about it. But so this is in response to some comments that a trustee had made a while ago. I can't remember exactly when, Trustee Knutson, and he had a good point that the town, because it had repealed its emergency declaration and there was no longer a statewide declaration in place, the board should reconsider virtual meeting participation. And you'll see throughout the resolution, there are some provisions. I put some thought into what a policy would look like. I looked at some other municipal policies, and ultimately this is what I came up with. This hasn't been ferreted out by the board yet, and this is going to be your policy. So it only respects board participation and the issue of voting. So it's not something that affects citizen participation. It's not a policy that extends to that. It's just board participation specifically. So I finally got my packet to reopen.
Page 98.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, so there are two different sections under here. The first has to do with remote participation when a meeting is hosted at the town hall. So that supposes that that most of the trustees, or that at least the town clerk is there running the meeting at the town hall. And if, a majority of trustees are in attendance at town hall, we'd look to subsection A. So the idea is that remote attendance by a trustee at a meeting hosted at town hall would be counted toward counting the quorum for purposes of the quorum. And then it would also be that person would still receive a vote, just like the board has been practicing, absent a policy, but still lawful under Colorado law to this point. So the board, including the mayor, can participate in a regular meeting or special meeting or an executive session or work session by phone or video for good cause. So that I've listed good cause here, and this is something the board could certainly scrutinize, but what I said was may prevent such person's physical attendance at the meeting, that's written broadly, or compromise such person's health or the health of others if they were to attend. I think it's reasonable to give the clerk advance notice of planned travel that would prevent a person's physical attendance so that remote participation could be adequately prepared for. But I don't think it should rise to the level of excluding someone's remote participation if they fail to provide that reasonable, adequate advance notice, because there are things that come up that could prevent somebody's attendance, but it's more of a courtesy that I've written in here, and I've seen that in other policies. Being nice to your clerk is always good, right? So a member joining a board meeting remotely can participate and vote on any item, including quasi-judicial matters. This is a point of contention, or had been, among attorneys and municipalities in the past. A lot of the issues that were perceived didn't actually come to fruition. And that's because of advances in technology and the ability of folks that are on the other end of things to hear and view and consider the testimony presented at the public hearing. However, there could be concerns that the board may have with that participation. The liability risk is a little bit higher, because if it were determined that a board member who was voting on something that participated in remotely didn't hear all of the evidence, then there's a risk that decision could get overturned. So there is a little bit more risk, but we have a script that we've prepared for these remote type meetings, or hybrid meetings, where a trustee or, a decision maker is in remote attendance where others are attending in person, that addresses the issues of disconnection, or if someone drops off. That has worked relatively well. And it's actually something that I used with the Board of Adjustment in Paonia that seemed to work well. Of course, we didn't experience connection issues during that, but I'm confident it would have worked well. So anyway, that is the first part of the policy regarding remote participation when meetings are hosted at Town Hall. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Yeah, trustee Kuzma?
One question I have is, I'm just thinking of a scenario where someone is on Zoom and it's a quasi judicial, and they're witnessing what the trustee is witnessing, and they're having a hard time hearing, or there's connection issues. Can that person then challenge, as a result of their experience having connection issues, saying that the trustee was probably not hearing properly?
Yeah, that's a very good point to make as well. And you'll see, I'll address that more specifically, but you'll see that there is a provision in here. Let's see. With meetings hosted remotely, where quasi-judicial actions, I think it's number 5. So 5 and 6. So public hearings and quasi-judicial actions shouldn't be taken during a remote meeting except upon the written request of the applicant. And then the applicant actually has to sign something that acknowledges the risks. And then the hearing has to be conducted in accordance with certain procedures, and those would be developed by our office, probably specifically me, and have been developed already. So those are designed to ensure the due process. And then the next provision 6 says that an applicant requesting the quasi-judicial hearing has to agree to defend and indemnify the town in any action that might arise out of conducting the hearing remotely. So basically, you're saying that if you have to hold a meeting remotely, then the applicant has to bear all of the risk of the decision, essentially. So it might be in that applicant's best interest to wait until the meeting can be held in person. So that's how we've addressed that specifically when meetings are hosted remotely. But the board could also decide to move those specific 5 and 6, specifically, I guess 7 too, I hadn't gotten that far, but move those up so that they're applicable to all meetings, not just those hosted remotely, but those hosted at Town Hall where a trustee is participating remotely. I didn't move those up, and the reason was because if one trustee is participating remotely, as often happens and sometimes does in today's world across the board with local governments, you might not have a meeting where everyone's present in person for a very long time. So that's another consideration that the board might find relevant to whether this applies across the board to any meeting where there's some level of remote participation. So that is getting back to your specific question, Trustee Knudsen. I think that is a concern, and it's something that a risk that we'd want applicants to bear if meetings were held remotely, like in an emergency setting. But when we're talking about just remote participation, I think that that's something that the board will have to, a risk that the board might have to bear, just because trustees sometimes have to participate remotely and the board has to carry on public business. So it might need that trustees remote participation for a quorum. So anyway, I'll turn it back to the board.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna, before we go on, I'm gonna take public input on this. Any public comment? Yes, Ms. Watts.
Sometimes when I've seen remote meetings with trustees that aren't here, I've wondered if with where they're at, they've actually had the time to prepare for the meeting. And then also, I think it would be also, well, anyway, I won't go any further. But yeah, I've been concerned sometimes that they're just on for a vote and they haven't really done the homework first. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Further discussion from the board or comment for. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. It's my understanding that there are judiciary processes that are being done remotely now. So that might, I mean, I don't have any problem with this. I think it was Bill Bruner that brought it up in the first place. But I think it makes sense, you know, just to say this is the technology that we have available right now. Let's use it to our advantage, and especially if other, you know, municipalities or somewhere else. But if you put this together, man, that's amazing. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Trustee McGinnis.
Yeah, I have a comment that's not necessarily in direct relation to this document, but I think given the experience of our last board meeting where the majority of the board wasn't in the room, I think if we adopt this, and I agree, I have no issues with it as written, I think we should have an understanding within the board as far as standards for when you are participating in a meeting remotely, specifically how is your vote affirmed. I think there are a couple of meetings that I've been to that we've had issues with, like, was that a yay, was that a nay? And so I think if we, as a board, draft guidelines that we can use when we are remote, it'll also help us who are still here to run the meeting smoothly. Yeah.
So I have not been participating remotely at all as a trustee, but I'm wondering those that have, is our system now good enough that you can hear what's going on and you can hear the audience? Okay, this, an audience member got up at the last meeting, was kind of complaining that maybe you couldn't hear the audience, but I think if it ever changes, we can't do this.
But yeah,
But now,
yeah,
because I know you were having trouble before Al.
Yeah, that was before the hour.
Yeah.
I was in Starbucks.
oh,
You know, it was like really shaky and they're ready to close. And so like, if anything could have gone wrong, it did.
yeah.
They had music playing in the background. I had to go out in the parking lot. It was in Rifles. There were all these diesel trucks driving down the highway. It was tough.
And I would like to suggest you don't participate.
Yeah.
If anybody's in that situation, say, I'm sorry if it's not a quorum, but it's not fair. If you can't hear what you're voting on and we can't really tell if you're hearing, I don't think that's a good way to do business. But if this continues in a good fashion and people are in a place where they're, you know, it's a professional setting where they're sitting remotely, I'm good with it if we can keep this going.
Actually, I found it quite a benefit because the two times that I had this, one was for CML and then the other one was when my daughter was just after her hysterectomy. And I was taking care of her. it was really nice to be able to do it and, very quiet and, yeah. I thought it was really beneficial, and I could hear and I could see and I could hear the audience. I just, I wouldn't run the meeting because I couldn't interact and see who was out there and raising their hand and all the rest of that stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, I think we're to the point it's okay, but if there's a point it's not okay, we revisit.
Okay, anything else from the board? Okay, do we want to have a motion? Do we want to do changes or whatever?
I'll move that we accept resolution 11/2023 as written.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. All right, now let's move on to number 10. Opportunity to attend Colorado Rural Water Smart Audit. So this was sent to me by Chris Stewart from Delta Emergency Services. And when I read it, I thought, wow, could we use this or what? Not just the staff, but the board would be very helpful with this as well. And since the criteria for making a team needs to have elected and appointed officials, water resource managers, planning developers on that team, I thought, yeah, this would be great. Now, there's no guarantee that we would be chosen, but at least we could try to put together a team and put together something and try to go to this conference. So, first of all, I'd like to get input from the public. Okay, seeing none. First off, is this something we would want to do? Ms. Guzman.
I'm going to speak up for it. So we'd really like to send the public works staff that has anything to do with water. So that'd be probably about 5 people. And so all expenses are paid for this. It's not any money out of our pocket. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is that Trustee Valentine and I attended we cheated and went to the attorneys' conferences. Because they're way more interesting, but anyway, we went to the one on outlying lawns, was a passion of mine from my Cal Poly days when they taught us lawns and exotics should not be used in any landscape. It's a matter of 5 to 10 years before none of us will have lawns because of the water situation. It's the biggest user of clean water that does not need to happen. So I think the more that you can get educated about this water situation, the better, because things are going to change. It's inevitable.
So we would need one person from the board and then one person from the planning commission, the way I read this. So if we had 5 public works people, we would need one person from the board, one person from the planning commission. Yes.
So I'm being kind of forward, but I'd like to volunteer to be the board member based on my natural resources background.
I'd like to volunteer too.
Well, we need somebody from the planning commission. That's the problem.
If we have 2 volunteers.
Current and long range use planners. How would we, all right, unless we can.
Can we not just pay for extras?
Here is what, okay, they're pretty clear. They have 3 stars, donates or denotes required representative. And one is by elected and appointed officials. One is by current and long range land use planners. And one is by water resource managers. And teams, 5 to 7 team members.
So we can
5 to
have
7 people on a team. So if we send 5 people from the water department, we can only send 2 other people. So unless Dave Newton wants to drop off the planning commission, you want to take on the planning commission role.
I think what the mayor is suggesting is possibly a good idea for this, because you also, your term is extending 2 years past this. And so your continuity on this.
Well, unless she runs for office. John is going to be on the board for another 2 years, guaranteed.
So am I. I'm till 26.
She's still,
I'm
she's
4
20
years term.
She got 4 years.
Yeah, I got a 4-year term.
Oh, okay, so, oh, okay.
Thomas got the short straw.
So the other thing. So Madam Mayor, so I'm working pretty actively on both planning efforts right now. And I'm a member of the planning commission, but I'm willing to change that role.
Oh, wait, Paige, you're on the plan thing.
Oh, I'm not helping on the housing
She's
stuff,
helping.
but I'm not.
So
that's not-
Oh, but that's
Official.
long-term.
That's not
No.
the planning commission. So
Wait.
maybe Paige and I.
But current and long-range land use planners.
So,
She,
That can be our staff. These
yes. So we could designate one of our staff as a long-range planner?
yeah.
Well, I really think that means Corey and his water and sewer crew are the ones that are responsible for advising you on your long-range water and sewer needs. I think I wouldn't take this too literally.
Okay.
You don't have a planner, I think, yeah.
Okay, well, as long, we'll take some help in massaging this, but yeah.
And I
Okay.
also told Stefan that I would call them and see if you can expand a little bit. I think they're gonna just be happy to have people there. What they're saying is they don't want 2 people to show up.
No, but I suspect, considering that it's paid for completely, and they're only gonna pick a few teams, they're not picking everybody. That this is going to be fought over. So I think the best team, and yeah, if there's any way that we can take those 2 board members plus 5 people from water, then yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
So we'll massage definitions, yes.
So part of the problem I'm having is I still have to have coverage here, so
Oh,
at least one of my water guys is gonna have to stay to cover the plants.
Opens a slot.
So we can only take 4 guys?
Well, I could still take another public works guy, if that's what we need to do, I'm just trying.
No,
to
we
think
can take another board member or whatever, but,
Yeah,
so
so,
that, you're saying that we have to, only
Yeah,
4 the
sure.
water guys.
yeah, at least have to have one here to cover daily operations of the plants.
You just have to have.
Yeah.
The ones that have the 2 stars, you have to have elected and appointed officials.
Right.
Which is plural, the current and long-range land use planners, plural, and water resource managers, plural. The rest of it is just whatever.
Madam Mayor, this is the right proposal.
No, what happens is, here's what happens, is the team gets together, you decide who's on the team, and they get together. And put together, they answer the questions, and they write, they are the ones that write the proposal.
You could also include,
That's what I was just thinking, I think that maybe Stefan should be on this, and he would qualify as a long-term land use person.
yes.
Well, I'm not AICP certified.
No, 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 no,
I've done this for 7 years, so I would say long range planning is my.
But as town administrator,
We're not
that's
getting
part
that
of one of
over
your duties.
Yeah. Absolutely, the only issue I see, I volunteer, but October 24th is also my daughter's birthday. That's okay. My wife is
You
no
can
no
switch.
longer online.
We get it.
By October, you
But
may
she
be
can
switching
watch
to
the
the
video.
board anyway.
So then perhaps the team would be 4 people from Public Works.
Mayor, if I will, I
Yeah.
think the motion that you guys are looking for is to see if you're interested in doing this, so we can create the team as we go, so.
Right, and we'll have 2 volunteers from the board, so that's an excellent motion. Would somebody like to make that motion? Thank you.
I'd like to move that trustee Valentine and Smith and the staff develop the proposal.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All All right, that motion passes. Thank you. This is a great opportunity. I'm so glad she's going to do this. All right. Next up is approval of the bid to K&D Construction for replacement of the Dora sewer line and authorize the town administrator to negotiate the final contract. And I think Ms. Kuzmeyer already went over this, that K&D came in with the low bid and that they actually came in with really good references as well. Okay, somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the. Is this order? I make a motion that we approve the award of the bid to K&D Construction.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Anything from the public? Okay, yes, Mr. Trustee Martin.
What was the amount of the bid?
It was just under 300,000.
Yeah, it was 299.
The other bid was over 400.
Do we budget for 299,000 to be spent on doors this year?
We got a grant. We got a grant for.
That was budgeted, already in the budget, and then we'll use the grant to offset the cost.
Thank you.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. All right, next is we have consideration and approval of granting accounting deputy clerk Amanda Moharo Muley electronic access to the town bank account. And this just came up this middle of this week, that she needs to be able to view all the bank accounts so that you can give the correct information to professional management services so that they can go ahead and do what they need to do. The only accounts that she can do anything with is the general account, and that she can move money around so that we can pay bills. And I have to give authorization to actually do that. Okay. Anything from the public? All right, board, yes. Mark?
Yeah, I think that it makes sense to have all of our bank accounts publicly viewable by anybody. Not just Ms. Moharo. That's public, I mean, that's public information, and I'm pretty sure it's horrible. So I mean, this is totally great, but if there would be a way to make it public, that might be good transparency.
This is from the bank, through the bank.
Yeah.
Mayor, if I could make it
It's hypothetical.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
a clarification, so this is specific to the bank's portal.
Right.
So
Yeah.
username and login.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's,
yeah, I'm saying like philosophically, it would be good to have public access. Realistically, I understand that that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
So in the past, in the previous disbursements, we had a table that showed what was in each bank account. We have not done that anymore because we're reconfiguring, so I would like to suggest maybe we do that again, so everybody can see amounts in each account. You can't go in and, view the entries, but they can see the totals of each account
Well, hopefully we won't be
monthly. Right, and we probably had, maybe 10 or something, but anyway, I'm just suggesting we could at least give the totals in each account.
And your real financial statements that you're gonna be getting in August, that's listed anyway.
Good.
Yeah, you're gonna see that. I know you haven't before, but you'll be amazed at what the South.
One consideration, we had a public comment earlier about including ClearGov, and we had paid for ClearGov a lot. Part of ClearGov is supposed to be accomplishing exactly what trustee Mark was suggesting, where people can go in, they can see every transaction, and they can see what the checks were written and all those things. So what I suggest is that we really keep an eye, as we get this financial system in order, that we charge the finance people to get ClearGov up and running so that we have more transparency.
That's their plan. They're used to using it. We just weren't using it.
It was best practice and we got it.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
It should be good.
okay. Can we?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve approve the granting of Amanda Moharo the view-only access to the town bank accounts.
All right,
I'll
there's a
second that
second.
motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. All right, next we have consideration and approval to write an EIF grant to DOLA for $1 million to help fund the relining of the 2 million gallon tank. So this is in conjunction with the SRF loan. This will reduce the amount of our loan by $1 million. And the matching funds, which is a one-on-one match, will be paid for by the.
So Madam Mayor, this will pay for all the medical insurance for next year.
No, it's to pay for the million gallon.
The savings in interest.
Yeah.
My only question is, does this grant need to be written and who will be doing it?
I have written it. It is sitting on Dana Levesque's desk for his opinion. Cool. All right, here we have a motion.
Motion that we approve the grant submission. Hold on. That we approve the submission of the DOLAEIAF $1 million grant.
We have a second.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. All right, this one, the SIPA grant, we may or may not need this. I have been, John, or Ruben and I have been fighting with this audiovisual system ever since we got the owls, and John ordered the owls, and we've been trying to set up a speaker system so that it would play to the audio. And we had just pulled our hair out. Well, Ruben has no hair, so that's an advantage there. A little bit. So, and we haven't been able to make this work. And so finally, I ran into the SIPA representative at CML, and she said, oh, there's another grant opening, you guys should apply for it. So I thought, well, maybe we got some professional services, get a professional advisor in here, come and look at it. So I've been calling around trying to get an estimate about how much it would cost to have a professional come in here and help us. Well, in that quest this afternoon, about 3 o'clock, 3:30, because it was after we finished the conference, I get a call from a guy at AV, someplace in Grand Junction that has offices in Aspen and a bunch of different places, and talked to him about the issues. And he had been out here prior to Corinne writing this first SIPA grant. And he said he knew the setup, he'd been in this room, and talked to him about the owls and all the problems that he was having. And he said, you know, owls don't work with other systems. They're just that way. I know what your room looks like. And I think this is your solution. And so he set me up with, there's a Yamaha thing that you can add 4 microphones to it. It'll sit out here, you can put speakers on it. And it would cost $1,100 with, I think they're $350 for 3 speakers that we would put out. So we still have, if we send back the speakers that you bought, John, or the microphones that you bought, John, we would have probably enough money left in the grant that we have to practically buy the new system. And if we need less money, I'll write a $600 SIPA grant. So we may not, you know, if you'll allow me to write a $600 or so SIPA grant, then I'll write a $600 or so SIPA grant. Yes, Mr. Mark.
Is this grant specific to audiovisual equipment?
Yes. That's what the whole SIPA program is.
Well, I mean, actually, it's pretty broad. They have a lot of technical.
Right, but this is, yeah.
But I was gonna say, if it's not specific to physical equipment, I think we can get a SIPA grant for services from some other vendors. There are a lot of services that have to do with communication, scheduling, and public interface that might be beneficial. but I don't know if it would apply.
Well, and yeah, I went looking for somebody in the area who could help us, and there just isn't anyone on this side of the mountain.
Yeah, that would be
So anyhow, if you would give me permission to write a small SIPA grant if needed, I would do that.
And you're just gonna go ahead and return the others and have this gentleman help? Or he just told you what you needed right now?
Yeah, and I will take some pictures and send it to him, and then if he's gonna give us an estimate of the big picture. And I figure we'll spend the rest of the grant money. If it doesn't work, then I'll look for a grant back here. System.
And this, does that mean we have to get rid of the owls?
No, the owls will be
Oh, no, we're good.
there.
We don't have- We're not starting over.
No, we're not starting.
augmenting.
It's the next step up.
Okay.
It's called a digital processor.
Okay.
And I assumed, most of them are fairly expensive. I assumed that one was precluded by our grant application. So I don't know.
Anyhow,
It
yeah,
would work.
okay.
How
So
much does that cost?
it's 1,100.
Your thing, is that what this is?
Yeah,
Your
Oh,
digital,
they come in all flavors.
so we can afford our digital.
Yes,
Okay.
we have enough money left over in the grant to do this. All right, can I get a motion to?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the submission of a state internet portal authority grant up to $6,500 for professional technical assistance
No, it won't be professional technical assistant.
or audio visual.
There you go.
There we go.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Or anything from the public? Yes, Ms. Vaughn.
If you could consider maybe indexing of our, I don't know if that's a possibility, where you can click on the agenda and it takes you right to the video of that part of the meeting. If those are technologies that could be covered under this.
All right, thank you.
Okay, it's really nice.
Yeah.
Makes the meeting so short.
All right, all in favor of writing this grant for up to $6,500 for AD equipment?
Aye.
All right, next. Last, consideration and approval of the River District Grant Agreement. We did get the $25,000. I just need the ability to sign it and say yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the River District Grant Agreement.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes. All right, yes.
I'm gonna suggest that you extend the meeting an hour. I don't think we're gonna go that long, but that way we won't have to come back out if we do.
Trustee Martin?
I move that we go into executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-64024B for the purpose of conferencing with the town attorney to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pertaining to potential encroachment of the fence and town-owned right-of-way adjacent to property located on First Street, as well as executive session pursuant to CRS sections 24-64024A and 4EI for the purposes of 41, for the purposes of considering the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real, personal, or other property interests, and determine the position of developing strategy and instructing negotiators relative to matters that may be subject to negotiation, specifically pertaining to a proposed amendment to the existing tower lease with SBA Communications concerning town-owned property located on Cemetery Circle Drive.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, there's two items on the agenda that we have not covered yet. One is the mayor's report, and see if there's any questions about that. And secondly, I wanted to lift up the housing action plan, and the community meeting is happening on Thursday. And so we need some discussion about that prior to going into executive session.
Okay, well then, let's vote me on that. We'll do these and then do that, okay? All in favor?
Aye.
Not yet.
No,
This one.
all right. So any questions on the mayor's report? And it's basically just everything that I attended while I was at the CMO conference. Yes. Trustee Knudsen?
Well, I really think this is an example, there was a similar thing with the oil and gas conference I went to, and I think any trustee or the town is sending them to a conference, that's really relieves that person to accept the responsibility of reporting back to the board publicly. And I really appreciate how much detail you gave us here, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
And I would like to mention that the town did not send me to this. I spent my own money to go to this conference, as did Trustee Downs.
Thank you.
Well, we appreciate that.
Too great.
Well, we really appreciate that.
Okay, and then, so any questions on the County Housing Needs Assessment and Housing Action Plan? Not that we can answer them. So their meeting, their public meeting is this Thursday, July 13th at 5:30. And so please show up and give your thoughts and issues and discussion about housing.
If I might add, it's not here, it's at the Ellen Hansen Smith Center.
AKA Teen Center, yeah.
Does open meeting allow any of us to attend as spectators?
Yes.
So that's a good question. So what I usually advise, and Sam did that for tomorrow night for the reception, is that you notice it, but it's not a workshop or meeting. You just say, we're having this thing, more than 2 board members might be there. You don't have to technically, but I like to be pretty clear. Yeah.
Could we have that done?
Yes, please.
Yeah, that could be good.
That'd be good. Trustee Knudsen and I are both gonna be there as facilitators. And, okay, I mean, we have to be there, we've already volunteered. So, yeah, good point.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's not, you don't have to legally do it, but just in case, it just covers you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Trustee.
Can I move that we extend the meeting an hour before we go into executive session?
That's a very good thing to do. Yeah. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Just to specify, this would be extending the meeting till 10:30 or extending the meeting till 10:15?
And now we're going to 10:12.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion, we take a 5-minute break. Sorry.
Wait a minute, you're in the middle of the motion. We can't make another motion. No, we didn't.
Oh, okay, sorry.
We're
Can
still
I
on
clarify
the
that motion?
motion. Yes, you can modify your motion.
The modification of the motion is I motion we extend the meeting until 10:30 p.m.
Okay. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. So then we can take a break in a minute. But then I guess we should take a break and then come back and do the executive session. You can breathe a lot and get ready. I'd like to get through all the executive session. All right.
Move to recess 5 minutes.
Do we have a second? All in favor? Aye. All right, go recess. Oh, what I'm gonna do is I have a plan to get a timer with a red, yellow, and green thing up here that will.
So we can, that was.
Yeah, the problem
Yeah,
the problem is that people standing up here can't see the timer up there.
so there would be.
Yeah, that'll be better. Everybody can see it.
No, you didn't ruin my first one.
6,000, which is why
Yeah, and it's even hard to see exactly.
This is what he's proposing. That you can, yeah, you can add 4 microphones. And then you can plug it into the. Until we're not getting into the delay.
Still, yeah, still. Yeah.
Difference is like 3 mics.
That's the part that's a surprise to me. It should be
So it's
cheaper than the, but that's the way it works now. It's more integrated, more transparent, and cheaper.
Yeah.
I remember the differentiate.
That was the one chair.
No, you're not.
Oh,
Yeah,
they're really,
they have a lot of uses. You really need that.
stage lights. Audience 4 hours. Computers.
This is exactly, yeah, I mean, think back to him, my God, it's so close.
This scraps.
So he'll send, you know, if this doesn't work. If they don't have orange, shoes will
Somebody. See, I was figuring $1,000 on this.
Oh, no, I thought, this is the university. I said, Tony, where did we put them? He goes, put them
Do we have any left over?
Oh, yeah, they're gonna go up here and,
Yeah.
we're probably gonna put some of the panels down.
Well, I will pursue these kind of guys. I sent them photos and everything. They said, yes, that's.
Yeah.
That is why. We get extra there too.
And so it's done, so we have like $15,000 left.
Oh, that's finished.
Plus
Yeah.
whatever,
Speakers and water.
so we got almost $2,000. We don't have to
No, not really.
No.
Unless all of us want wireless mics. We could each be mic'd out.
No, you're not. You want the little things on the back. Well, the guy at AV Electronics says this is professional quality.
Maybe we could rent the mics out to the high school when they're doing their musical.
You guys already turned down the running equipment out.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we did that. All
All
right, we're all back. So Thomas, you want to read your stuff and let's get going. This meeting is back in order. All right.
Now I move that we go into executive session pursuant to CRS section 24640224B for the purposes of conferencing with the town attorney to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pertaining to potential encroachment of the fence and town-owned right-of-way adjacent to property located on First Street. And pursuant to CRS section 24640224A and 4E1 for the purposes of considering the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real, personal, or other property interest and determining position, developing strategy, and instructing negotiators relative to matters that may be subject to negotiation, specifically pertaining to proposed amendment to the existing tower lease of SBA Communications concerning town-owned property located on Cemetery Circle Drive.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, that motion passes. All right, we are clearing the room. I'm sorry, Suzanne.
Thanks.
All right, the time is now 10:17 PM and the executive session has been concluded. Participants in the executive session were trustee McGinnis, trustee Knudsen, trustee Martin, trustee Smith, trustee Stelter, Ms. Kuzmeyer, Mr. Cotton-Byas, and Mr. Heiner. And don't forget Mr. Wynn. Oh my God, I need to emblazon your. For the record, if any person who participated in the executive session believes that any substantial discussion of any matters not included in the motion to go into executive session occurred during the executive session, or that improper action occurred during the executive session in violation of the open meetings law, I would ask that you state your concerns for the record. I think there was unauthorized laughter. All right, hearing none, I believe there is a motion. Does somebody remember?
I would if anyone would like to make a motion, I would entertain a motion that would just say direct the town attorney to proceed with municipal prosecution regarding the fence issue as discussed in executive session. Someone say so moved.
Okay, somebody would like to move that, or so move that.
No. So you can't so move.
Okay,
So yeah, I move that we direct the town attorney to proceed with municipal prosecution regarding the town-owned right-of-way adjacent property located on First Street as discussed in executive session.
so I have a second that. All right, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. We are now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.